Hello and welcome back to day 2 of this devotional with Pastor Grant going through the book of Ruth. And last week we learned about these 5 principles of guidance. And if you didn't get a chance, please go back, check that out. It'll be totally worth it. And it'll kind of lead into what we're talking about today. And what are we talking about today, Pastor Grant?
We want to look at some things relating to God's plan for our life.
Yeah. Awesome. Sweet. So let's jump in.
Let's jump in. All right. So the book of Ruth, we remember she had married one of Elimelech's sons. Both of the boys died. Elimelech died, and now Naomi's coming back to Bethlehem. And so she's got 2 daughters-in-law. And Naomi really reacts very well here. She tries to dissuade them from coming with her. She says, look, girls, you'll be better off in your own land, with your own people and your own parents, and you can find another husband, and things will go well. And one of them says, yeah, you're right. But Ruth was not like that. Ruth said, I'm coming with you, and I'm not changing my mind. And I'd like to read really quite a well-known passage where she addresses Naomi. We're in chapter 1, verse 16. She says, entreat me not to leave you or to turn back from following after you. For wherever you go, I will go. And wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts you and me. It's a very, very strong commitment. A lot of people might say, well, I'll come on over, but when I die, I'd like to be buried back in my homeland, or something like that. But Ruth was making a complete commitment to Naomi, and to her people, and to her God. And I can tell you, moving from one culture to another, it's not easy, even if you speak the same language. There's always things that are different, and you tend to stand out. Like, for instance, you might have an accent, and people notice that. Or you might say unusual things, like you might greet somebody and say, "G'day, mate, how's it going?" And it kind of makes you stand out a little bit. So here's Ruth, she's probably talking with an accent, and she would have stood out. But what was God's plan for her life? What was her plan? We can get caught up in thinking, well, the plan's got to be grand. I mean, I've got to, conquer a city or something rather, do something very big and spectacular. But for many of us, in fact, probably most of us, that is not the case. And when you look at Ruth, God's plan for her life essentially was to take care of her mother-in-law. Now, that doesn't sound particularly exciting, but it was important, and that was her plan. Another one is Abraham. What was God's plan for his life? Really, it was to have a son by his wife Sarah, so that he would have descendants. That was the principal thing that he was to do. So here we have Ruth, not doing something particularly spectacular, just doing the thing that she's supposed to do and taking care of her mother-in-law. And I was thinking about the parable of the servants who were given talents. And you remember one of them was given 10 talents and another 5, and the third one had 1. The one with 10, he went out and he did a great job and he doubled it. And the Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. And then the one with 5, he did the same thing. He doubled it. So the Lord gave him exactly the same commendation. So he didn't get a lesser commendation because he didn't manage to turn his 5 into 20 like the other man. But he did develop what he had. Now the third one failed to do that. And of course he was condemned by the master. And I wonder, if he'd taken his 1 talent and he'd developed that, would he have been told, well done, good and faithful servant? I think he would. I think he would have had exactly the same commendation. So you see, God does not expect us to do things that we're not capable of doing. We all have a role. And the important thing is that we will play our role. For some of us, that is to be a good husband or a good wife, a good parent, a good employee. Those are the things that are important for us. And we shouldn't belittle those and look down on them because they mean a lot. And sometimes it influences somebody else, and that person goes on and accomplishes something great. We wind up being an influence without even really realizing it. But the Lord just uses us in that particular situation. Now, just coming back for a moment to the individual who just had the 1 talent. One of the things we have to be careful of, if we're one of those people that think, well, I really don't have a lot of skills. I can't do a whole lot of things. And so perhaps we don't do anything. That's not a good position. Remember, that man was condemned by his master. It's a very severe condemnation if you want to read it. And so whatever we have, whatever we do, we need to develop that. We always have something that we can develop. And don't go looking at your life and thinking, yeah, I can't do very much. I'm not as good as this person or that person. I don't have that skill. You don't have to be worried about those things, because you see, God will look at your heart. God, if you will walk with him, will cause you to prosper, and you will do well in the things that he has for you.
Thank you so much, Grant. And I think a question that we all have, and maybe you guys can relate listening. I bet you can, but how do I know God's plan for my life? I know I've thought that a lot. And so what's your advice when people ask that to you? What's the God's plan for my life, Grant?
And for some people seem to really know right from the get-go. They know, you know what, I'm going to be a doctor. I just know I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a pilot, whatever it may be. I think of Billy Graham. Billy Graham was conducting evangelistic crusades, I believe, in his 20s, certainly as a very young man. And so he must have known the plan of God. Luis Palau is another one. He knew all along that he was to minister to large audiences. But many of us are not like that. For many of us, we just kind of go through life. And so how do we know what God would have for us? Well, again, it comes down to praying about things, making decisions, making good decisions as we go along. And what happens is the plan of God frequently unfolds. And I'll give you an example from the life of my father-in-law. He and my mother-in-law had been ministering to people for many, many years, several decades. And he has a very strong word of knowledge. The Lord will speak to him about situations. And they were in their 60s. And we were all living in Seattle at the time. And a man from England came over, and he invited my father-in-law to go to a conference in England. My father-in-law didn't want to go. We practically dragged him onto the plane. But we got him off there. And when he came back, I said, "How did it go?" And he said, "It was a big disappointment." He said, "All the things the guy said I'd be doing, I didn't do any of those. It was really just a big disappointment." And he felt quite disheartened over it. But here's what happened. While he was there, he met a man from Germany. And the man from Germany contacted him and said, "We'd love to have you come to Germany." And there began, for a period of about 25 or more years, they went over to Europe. They made probably about 100 crossings. And they ministered to many people in Germany and Switzerland in particular. And so God opened up a whole thing. And you see, what had been going on in their life up to that time was preparing them for what he had in mind in these later years. All of those years and years of experience of ministering to people in all sorts of different situations prepared them to go into this one. And they were able to do that for many years and very successfully.
And I think we're all wanting that question to be answered so quickly and want it to be so black and white, and God's not in the right. I mean, wouldn't you say God just doesn't very rarely go, "Yep, here's the plan for your entire life"?
We might go, "No, that's not what I had in mind."
That's probably right.
And so often it unfolds. And, you know, another thing too, very often our most productive years are later in our life.
Yeah. Yep. Hopefully that's the way for us. Anyways, thanks so much for listening. I really appreciate you guys paying attention. I know Grant does. So tomorrow will be day 3 with Pastor Grant. We're going to be looking through the providential hand of God and what that means, and kind of diving into that. So we'll see you guys tomorrow. Don't forget, 7 a.m. tomorrow. Love you guys, and we'll see you tomorrow.